Man, the original Shovel Knight campaign is so good. Shouldn't be too long to finish the DLC at this point. Going through this review, I had no idea the amount of work Yacht Club Games put into this, both in the base game and the DLC they released in the years preceding it. This was when indie games and nostalgia were all the rage. Today, that craze is still going strong, but is leaning over to the side of the nostalgia versus indie. Nick Wozniak came up with a crazy idea for a video game and met with several other developers to work on a video game in the style of an old NES platformer. The team was having issues deciding the style of the game when one day genius struck Wozniak. Hey, let's make a Zelda 2 game.
Excuse me?
And thus Yacht Club Games created an amazing platformer based on Zelda 2. And somewhere in there they added a mix of Mega Man, Mario, DuckTales, and Castlevania. Shovel Knight began with a Kickstarter and was only shooting for $75,000 and ended up getting $311,500. All of that went into this project and it shows. The dev team worked very hard in mimicking the style of classic NES games. The music of Shovel Knight is a chiptune style soundtrack composed by Jake Kaufman, and they even were able to get Mega Man composer Maname Matazume to compose a couple of tracks in the game. Shovel Knight Treasure Trove also looks amazing, as Yacht Club Games limited themselves to the NES color palette to keep the game feeling like a true NES title. Some things couldn't be avoided, however, and some features were not doable on NES hardware that had to be implemented in, like parallax scrolling. However, that didn't keep Shovel Knight from getting a bad rap. When it was released, it was loved by both critics and fans alike. A very impressive reception for an indie game at the time. Nowadays, indie games are all over Steam and the Nintendo eShop, but back in 2014, this was something new and very enjoyable. Let's jump into the story, but before we begin... Yeah, the game is 6 years old, but better safe than sorry. Our story begins with a knight named Donovan and his friend Luan, who go to find a highly sought-after amulet in the Tower of Fate. Unbeknownst to the two adventurers, another knight named Shield Knight is there, and she warns the fortune hunters that they are meddling in powers they do not understand. Donovan challenges Shield Knight and wins, but the tower begins to crumble and Donovan falls to almost certain death. As the tower crumbles, Shovel Knight, our protagonist, tries to save his love and partner Shield Knight, but fails and turns to a life of solitude, grieving over his beloved. Just before Donovan dies, a mysterious figure known as the Enchantress appears, and says that if he brings her 8 knights to form the Order of No Quarter, she will give him his life back. Donovan agrees, and dons the mantle of Spectre Knight and begins his search. Don't you just hate it when you have to sell your soul? Yeah, me too. Spectre Knight first finds King Knight, who is on a quest to win the Jouster tournament and become the Jouster King. Spectre Knight assists King Knight by giving him his first card deck. This allows King Knight to defeat 3 Jouster judges, King Pridemore, the Truffle King, and King Burger. With the 3 judges defeated, they assist King Knight, and it is revealed that the Enchantress orchestrated the tournament to bring forth a strong knight that will rule as a puppet leader for her over the land. With King Knight fulfilling this role and becoming the King of Cards, Spectre Knight finds 6 more knights, which equals 7 out of the 8 knights for the Order of No Quarter. As he begins his journey for the 8th knight, Black Knight shows up and explains to Spectre Knight that the Enchantress is actually an evil spirit that is possessing Shield Knight, which came from the amulet. Spectre Knight attempts to confront the Enchantress, but she forces Reeds, Luan's son, to fight Spectre Knight. Spectre Knight defeats Reeds, but before he dies, Spectre Knight surrenders to being the 8th knight to save Reeds' life. With 8 knights at the Enchantress's disposal, havoc ensues, and Shovel Knight must don his trusty spade and go fight the Order of No Quarter. Our heroes battle through the Order, which is made up of the aforementioned Spectre Knight, King Knight, Treasure Knight, Wall Knight, Plague Knight, Polar Knight, Propeller Knight, and Tinker Knight. Black Knight, who has a history with Shovel and Shield Knight, injects himself into the story many times, mostly to protect Shield Knight and keep anyone from harming her. During Shovel Knight's quest, Plague Knight turns on the Order to gather each of a knight's essence to combine them into the most powerful potion in the world. As Plague Knight gathers the essence, he discovers a love for his assistant Mona and works to prove his feelings through his quest. Cutting back to our hero, Shovel Knight defeats the Order and heads to confront the Enchantress in the Tower of Fate where it all began. Both Shovel Knight and Plague Knight rematches the Order after crashing their last supper, and with his potion complete, Plague Knight and Mona confess their love for each other at the base of the tower while Shovel Knight goes to fight the Enchantress. After defeating the Enchantress, Shovel Knight breaks the curse Shield Knight is under. The Enchantress transforms into an entity known as the Remnant of Fate and attempts to kill both of the knights. Shovel Knight gets wounded, but Black Knight shows up and saves him just in time as Plague Knight and Mona decide to use the potion to destroy the Tower of Fate. Shield Knight stays behind to give the 2 knights time to escape, and just as we thought she was dead, we see her crawl out of the tower and fall asleep in Shovel Knight's arms by the fire. Yeah, the story can be a little bit all over the place when you put it in a coherent narrative like that, but the game breaks it up into 4 different campaigns, so it's a better experience overall. Those campaigns being Shovel of Hope, Plague of Shadows, Spectre of Torment, and King of Cards. Each campaign has a different style of gameplay, but all of them are focused around the classic NES platforming. Each knight has a decent endurance and can be upgraded in a variety of ways throughout their campaigns, but spikes and bottomless pits are still unfortunately instant deaths. Treasure Trove ditches the classic NES life system, and instead drops bags of money for you to go back and collect. This is a welcome change, as the old NES life system was shit. Money is everywhere in this game, and you have to collect a lot of treasure to be able to upgrade your life, gear, and magic. Each character has magic at their disposal to use with certain relics and special abilities to assist you on your playthrough, but you can beat the game without any of them if you so choose. All of the campaigns share these similarities, but there are a lot of details that make each of them unique. Shovel Knight uses his trusty weapon to dig through the dirt and bounce off of enemies. This mode feels the most fleshed out. The X button allows you to use your shovel for attacks, and if you jump you can push down on the left thumbstick to damage an enemy or obstacle underneath you. Shovel Knight's magic gets depleted over time, but can be regenerated with bottles found throughout the level. Plague Knight uses bombs that he can drop in a variety of ways, and he can launch himself with explosions to double jump and soar through the levels. His magic regenerates over time, which gave me more incentive to use his unique powers versus the others. Spectre Knight has some of my favorite gameplay, as he uses more of a parkour approach. Parkour! He can't double jump, but he can climb up walls for a short period of time and bounce from wall to wall. His weapon of choice is a scythe, which gives him a longer range of attacks and lets him dash through enemies and objects to reach anywhere you want in a diagonal range. King Knight has the most simple controls. He uses his noble shoulder bash, which when impacted with a wall or enemy, puts him into a spin jump and allows him to dig up treasure or bounce from enemy to enemy. He uses Vigor instead of Magic to use his special items. Being his campaign is named the King of Cards, it's only fitting that there's a card game mixed in with the gameplay. This game is 1v1, and you are trying to get the most gems before the center of the board is filled up with cards. You can push each other's cards unless arrows are facing the opposite direction. The Joustus card game is fairly forgettable. There is not much substance here, it's basically a harder version of tic-tac-toe. You can also cheat, which feels a little bit unfair, as one of the cards allows you to take all of the cards that are under a gem and turn them into your cards.
Jenny wait for 30?
Got my cheat card.
Cheat cards!
This can make the game feel way too easy at times, but the card champions you fight all have unique abilities that can make the game more challenging even with your cheat cards. This game is also really long. I was not aware of how much love and care was put in the DLC of this game. It's definitely not something you see with every game. The dedication to bring the same impact the original campaign had is impressive, but not all of it sticks. King Knight's story is very forgettable, and his levels are so short that I can't help but feel that his campaign is way better to play in 30-minute chunks. Both his campaign and Plague Knight's gave me some trouble going through them for different reasons. Plague Knight's controls took some getting used to, and not after an hour or two. It wasn't even until halfway through the story that I finally understood how to properly utilize his attacks and powers. Plague Knight's levels are also not mapped to fit his gameplay style. Most of these maps are just Shovel Knights with an extra pit or enemy added to give you a reason to use his double jump. You can swap your bombs out to have multiple attacks at once, but the game never explains that you can do this, and I stumbled upon it by accident. But once I did, oh man, the true game unlocked, and I had a considerable amount more enjoyment out of the gameplay. As for King Knight, I didn't really have much of an experience with this one. Each level lasts no longer than 10 minutes, and I couldn't help but feel that I would have enjoyed it more in 30-minute increments as stated earlier. Playing short levels like that for 3 or 4 hours straight is not fun. The Joustus card game is also lacking, as it does not have much depth to it and is only in the game for 3 to 4 areas. You hardly play it, and even in the end, King Knight abolishes the card game, so it almost feels thrown in at the last second. But where Plague Knight and King Knight fell flat on the gameplay, their stories kept me going. Yacht Club Games does a fantastic job at making their characters have large amounts of charm. This charm and small amounts of twists and turns throughout the stories kept me wanting to continue. Maybe not continuously like in King of Cards, but definitely in Spectre of Torment. Spectre Knight gets the best treatment out of all of the campaigns in terms of story, as his is the most engaging. They give you fragments of his relationship with Luan throughout the campaign, and it's quite touching. Spectre Knight's gameplay is also just fun. I almost want to say it's more fun than Shovel Knight. That may be because Shovel of Hope is an older experience, whereas Spectre of Torment was a new one for me, but his gameplay feels more explored than the other DLC stories. Almost like the studio spent more time on him compared to the rest. That being said, this entire game is still good. The pros of this game definitely outweighs the cons, and Yacht Club Games really worked hard on it, and it shows. It's a fantastic homage to the NES, but not a game to binge play through. If you had it on the 3DS, it's probably the perfect game. Just don't play through all of it back-to-back like I did, because you won't get the full enjoyment that the game deserves. If you have $40, you should pick it up. It's a great game to at least play through Shovel of Hope and Spectre of Torment.
Yeah, Shovel Knight Treasure Trove is a great game. Too bad I didn't get the full experience because I don't have a soul.
I thought it was hilarious. Munchkin Eric messaged me as soon as I changed it, and he was like, dude, this is absolutely fantastic. And I was like, you could thank Silken for that one.